and offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order, an order in which no nation must surrender one iota of its own sovereignty.
Your generation will not only be creating a new world, but will also live in it. Much of it will certainly be different from whatever we can imagine now.
In his comments here, Gorbachev again proclaimed an end to the Cold War, saying we should not dwell on who won. Instead, Gorbachev seeks to dwell on a new world order and a newly reformed Soviet Union.
What do these words mean? Why did Gorbachev mention the New World Order? Is there a movement in the world today that is striving to have a one-world government? As we look at our dollar bill, we see a pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top. Under that pyramid is an unrolled scroll with the words Novus Ordo Seclorum. Why were these words on the dollar bill? Let's see what one writer has to say about this. On the back of every dollar bill, starting with the 1928 silver certificate, is the symbol of Adam Weishaupt's dream and the goal of the insider, the eye over the pyramid with the year 1776 inscribed into the base of the pyramid in Roman numerals. Bannered beneath the pyramid are the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, meaning New World Order. New World Order. These are the words that Gorbachev used when he addressed the United Nations. Today, the United Nations is gaining power. Their goal is a new world order. There are at least 159 nations represented in the United Nations. The United Nations is a composite of many nations around this world that want a one-world government, a new world order. And we should be aware of what's happening in the United Nations today. Jesus Christ is not in this organization. We have the flags of many nations represented in the United Nations. The majority of these nations do not believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. In fact, as you go into the meditation room in the United Nations, you will see something like an Egyptian tomb. And at the end of that room, we find an abstract painting. Now, they won't tell you what that painting represents, but if you turn it on its side, you will see a pyramid and the symbols of good and evil in a circle with a black and white portion. This represents the powers of good and evil that stem all the way back to the Garden of Eden. Now let's look at our dollar bill. As we see our dollar bill, there are many mystic symbols on that piece of currency. We see the all-seeing eye above the great pyramid of Egypt. That all-seeing eye is what is to complete the pyramid. Now, as we think of pyramidal worship today and ancient times as it dealt with the great pyramids in Egypt, we think of a nation that was against the true God of heaven. When Moses came before Pharaoh and he said, "Let my people go," Pharaoh said, "Who is Jehovah that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I know not Jehovah, neither will I let Israel go." Now in ancient Egypt, they had the all-seeing eye, the eye of their god Osiris. They called it the law of frontality. That eye was always looking straight at you. We see it in their art everywhere. Now, if a person would make a drawing of a profile, you would find that an eye is in the form of a triangle on its side. This represents an eye looking the way the face is drawn. But in Egypt, it's a different story with the eye. Now, you can have a profile, which we see many times in the art of Egypt, but you will always see what is called the law of frontality. The eye does not look toward the view of that figure or the head, but it looks straight at you. And that is called the all-seeing eye. So as we look at the art of Egypt, we see this eye continually looking at you, although it's a profile on the figure, representing the all-seeing power of the God that they worshipped in Egypt. Now we find that all-seeing eye on the top of the dollar bill. This represents the power that will complete that pyramid in the New World Order. Now you could say New World Order in two ways: New World Order or New World Order. Here we find the god Osiris between two covering cherubs in Egypt. He is the many-eyed God. That all-seeing eye represents that God. But it is not the true God of heaven. He has a winged serpent as a covering cherub on one side of him. Now on the other side of the dollar bill, we find an eagle with a shield. And this shield is interesting as you look at it, because it has 13 stripes, and it's in front of the eagle, and we find the number 13 over and over again on this emblem. The pyramid and that shield in front of an eagle. Now as you go over these symbols, you will find they have a mystic meaning in the ancient cultures. Now this is an Air Corps wing, and we find the people in the Air Force today wear this symbol. It's that shield. This is a master pilot. He has a star over that shield with the wings. But where did that emblem come from? As we go back into history, again into Egypt, we find a very similar design in the god of Egypt, the scarab god, just like the Air Force wings. Now that's interesting because we know that in the end, fire will come from the heavens. It'll be a destroying power. The Air Force wings has this shield, and that shield actually is a symbol of a beetle. In Egypt, they have what they call dung or scarab beetles. They roll balls of manure along the ground, and they put it in a hole, and they feed on that manure and lay their eggs in that manure. Now the ancient Egyptians saw this, and they thought, surely there is a great beetle in the heavens that rolls the sun across the heavens every day. And so they put a beetle with a sun disk and wings representing a deity in their artwork. This is one of the amulets that came from King Tut's tomb. Here we find the all-seeing eye and that beetle in a green stone representing the giving of life. Here again we find the scarab beetle to the right with the sun and the all-seeing eye on this figure. It's all through the art of Egypt. Now they had what they called pectoral scarabs, and they had our heart scarabs as well that placed in the hearts of the deceased of the royal line. They made that beetle into a god. So we have a beetle head on a human figure, and the Egyptians called him Re-Karakti. What an insult to the true God of heaven. Here we have an occult painting that shows the scarab beetle in the form of a flying saucer. And in the end, all these things will tie together in a master counterfeit system of the devil himself. George Washington was a Mason. We find these mystic symbols on the backside of the dollar bill. He was a worshipful master in the Masonic order. He wears the apron with those mystic symbols, a secret society. And somehow, these symbols on the dollar bill go back to the Masonic order. The Masons have a pyramidal type of organization, and you go higher and higher in degrees as you go along in that organization. Many leaders in the world, especially the United States, belong to the Masonic order, and they have a big G there in their symbols representing God with the all-seeing eye. But this is not the true God of heaven. This is that same God that's represented with the all-seeing eye in ancient Egypt and mystic teachings all over this world today. Let us go to the 17th chapter of the book of Revelation and tie this in with the New World Order. And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore, that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Try to get the picture here. We have an angel, one of the angels with the vials, and he comes to John, and he tells him about this woman that we read about in Revelation 17. So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of eyes of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Here we find a woman that is a harlot. She is sitting on a great beast, a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, a scarlet-colored beast. Now, as we go along in Revelation 17, we will find that it interprets what these symbols represent. The woman is sitting on this dragon beast with 10 horns and 7 heads. We find she is arrayed in purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious jewels and pearls, and she has a cup in her hand full of abominations. The wine in that cup represent her false doctrines. And the inhabitants of the earth and the kings of the earth drink of that wine. Now, as it goes on, we read these words, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abomination of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And that word admiration, if you look it up, means astonishment or wonder. Babylon is mentioned in the Bible a number of times. The ancient Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar's time no longer exists. But we have a spiritual Babylon that persecutes, that wears out the saints of the Most High. And we will study about this persecution as we go along. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Now John identifies who he's talking about as we study the book of Revelation. This woman that sits on this scarlet-colored beast represents a false religious movement. The beast represents the devil himself, that was and is not, and ascends out of the bottomless pit and goes into perdition. This is a study of Revelation 20 that ties in with Revelation 17. Verse 9, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And here John points out that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Mountains represent kingdoms in the Bible. And we have these 7 mountains mentioned in Revelation 17. As we analyze the history of the nations of the world, we find the answer to this mystery that is given by John. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come, talking about these kings. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have 1 mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Those 10 horns represent 10 kings or powers that have received no kingdom as yet. And they make war with the Lamb. But the Lamb overcomes them, because he is King of kings and Lord of lords. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. These 10 kings or powers will turn on the woman in the end. This woman sits upon many waters, we are told. And those waters represent the peoples, the nations, the multitudes, the kings of the world. And this woman, representing a false religious movement, sits upon the waters of the world, or the peoples of the world that follow this false religious system are pictured here symbolically in Revelation 17. The Roman Church today has its people all over this world of ours. They have much outward adorning. But the peoples of the world not only follow the Roman Catholic Church, many of them, they follow the other churches and other systems, religious systems. In the end, this false religious system will be destroyed. The Lamb will overcome them, the true God of heaven. The Lamb representing Jesus and his self-sacrificing love. In the end, all the apostate religions, the false religious systems that are symbolized by Babylon, will be destroyed. Verse 18, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. This symbol of the woman reigns over the kings of the earth. So here we find the woman with much outward display, and the dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 mountains, and how the woman is destroyed in the end. As we study the Bible, we find a woman represents a church. In Revelation 12, we find a pure woman clothed with the sun, representing God's true people. She is clothed with the robe of Christ's righteousness, his character revealed in his people. She stands on the moon, and the moon is the foundation of the church, in this symbol representing the Ten Commandment law, a study within itself. Now, as we look at this woman, we find the dragon tries to destroy this woman and the child that she is to bear. That dragon is identified in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation. It has 7 heads and 10 horns in Revelation 12, just as the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns in Revelation 17. These are the systems that the devil works through to destroy God's truth. In Revelation 12, 7 through 9, it says there was a war in heaven. Michael, who is Christ, and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. We are told in verse 4 of Revelation 12, his tail draws 1/3 of the stars from heaven and casts them to the earth. Those represent the fallen angels. So here we find the dragon warring against the Lamb. But the Lamb overcomes that counterfeit system in the end. Now, as we go on in Revelation 12, we read that the woman is given the wings of a great eagle to flee into the wilderness. And the dragon and the serpent has water that comes out of its mouth to carry the woman away in a flood. Now, those waters represent the false doctrines that the devil uses through systems, peoples, and multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And so waters are very significant in the symbology of the book of Revelation. The old devil would like to destroy God's truth. He has a counterfeit system. And this woman in Revelation 17 represents, in a sense, his wife. And those waters, the false doctrines, we are told in Revelation 12, are swallowed up in the earth. And the woman lives on, the pure woman, the pure church, but she is persecuted. But when we go to Revelation 17, we find this woman isn't clothed with the sun. She is clothed with purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious jewels and pearls, and much outward adorning and display. And she has that golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication, we are told. The wine, fermented wine, that makes the inhabitants of the earth drunk. Now, in the Roman Church today, we find that they are required to use fermented wine in the Mass. And they have these cups, many times golden cups, much outward adorning. And as we think of this woman with all this outward display, no other religious power in the world today can fit so perfectly into that woman as the Roman Catholic Church. Although God has his people in that church, many wonderful Christian people in the Roman Catholic Church, but the doctrines of the church are exposed in the book of Revelation, and they are revealed in this woman sitting on this scarlet-colored beast. The Vatican today is full of mystic symbols that go back to ancient Babylon. The triple crown of the Pope represented in this painting that is supposed to be a figure of Almighty God himself. That triple crown reveals the Pope as the ruler of the world, the Father of kings and princes, and the Vicar of our Savior Jesus Christ. This is what they tell us in the Roman Catholic Church for the Triple Crown. Look at the Pope. He claims royalty, purple, and he is clothed, arrayed in scarlet, and decked with gold and pearls and precious jewels. This is what we find on the fish head hat of the popes of Rome. Gold, precious jewels, and pearls and scarlet. Can it be any clearer? As we go into these symbols and we notice the teachings of the Roman Church, we find they fit perfectly with the woman sitting on the scarlet-colored beast. She is called Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, with all this outward display. Now, it not only represents the Roman Church, but apostate Protestantism and the false religions of the world. That is Babylon. Look at this golden chalice. Fits in beautifully with the study of that cup, the golden cup full of wine. Now today there is a movement for a new world order. The Pope is right in the middle. He is called the Man of Peace. And the nations of the world are drinking of that wine. There have been many books that have been written exposing the atrocities and the persecutions of the Roman Catholic Church. History tells us of how this Roman power persecuted anyone that went against her dogmas. Huss and Jerome were burned at the stake because they did not go along with the teachings, the errors found in the Roman Catholic Church. It is estimated that up to 150 million people were put to death because they did not go along with the teachings of the Roman Church. St. Bartholomew's Massacre, where at least 70,000 Protestants were put to death in France because they were Protestants protesting against the teachings of the Church, the Roman Church. Many were burned at the stake. We find a story about the Waldenses in history, a beautiful people. Many kept the seventh-day Sabbath. They kept a true gospel, and they were persecuted horribly as well. As you go into the Catholic churches in Rome today, you will find beautiful altars, works of art, priceless today. This shows Mary booting two reformers out of heaven. It's in Rome. The Chiesa del Gesù, the church in Rome. This represents Martin Luther and one of the other reformers being booted out of heaven. They don't tell you this today because there's an ecumenical movement. But these people that were Protestant leaders were heretics. And here it shows Mary booting them out of heaven into hell. We find this little figure with a book, and he's tearing pages out of that book. That book represents the Word of God. And it could very well represent the 17th chapter of Revelation, or all of Revelation being torn out of that Bible. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. This woman persecuted God's true people. But not only the Roman Church, but Protestants persecuted as well, if people did not go along with their teachings in periods of history. And so we find it takes in more than the Roman Church. It takes in apostate Protestantism. And that's why many of these people, the Pilgrims, fled to the United States, a comparatively uninhabited land, for religious freedom. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Now this could be none other than the devil, the beast, because there will only be one time when those that dwell on the earth that do not have their names written in the book of life will see that book of records, and they will see the devil himself. And that is at the end of the 1,000 years that we read about in Revelation 20. This beast can be none other than the devil himself. And John identifies it when he mentions the book of life. Now we read this in Revelation 20, verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which are written in the books, according to their works. This is after the 1,000-year period that we read about in Revelation 20. This is when the wicked dead are raised, and they stand before the books of record, and there they see their part in the drama. And they see the devil at this time, and they know why their names are not written in the book of life. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now these 7 heads are 7 mountains, we are told. Now as we study the Bible, we find that mountains represent kingdoms. That's what we are told. And it says there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. And he continueth for a short space. Now as we study the history of the Bible, and we go to the prophetic books, Daniel and Revelation, we find a sequence of events in the kingdoms of the world, represented by these mountains in Revelation 17. And they also represent the kings of these nations. Now when we go to Daniel 2, we read the story of a great image. And this image has a head of gold, a breast of silver, a waist of brass, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. And then we are told there's a stone that was cut out without hands, smote the image, ground it into powder, and it became a great mountain. God's last kingdom is symbolized by a mountain. Now here we find the kingdoms of the world. The head of gold represented the Babylon during Nebuchadnezzar's time. The breast of silver represents the Medes and the Persians. The waist of brass represents Greece. And then we find as the metals get more inferior as we go along in this image that the legs are of iron, and they represent pagan Rome. And then pagan Rome is divided. Churchcraft and statecraft will continue on until the end, represented by the clay and the iron. They do not cleave together. Many have tried to unite Europe, but have never been able to do it. And it's during the time of this division that the stone that is cut out without hands smites the image and grinds it into powder. Now, in Daniel 7, we find beasts that represent these kingdoms, the same kingdoms. The winged lion here represents Babylon, just like the head of gold represented Babylon. And we find these beasts come up out of the sea, waters. Now it's interesting because in ancient Babylon, one of their symbols, one of the amulets that you find there, is a winged lion made of gold. Medo-Persia is represented by a bear. The Syrian bear that comes up out of the sea here. These beasts do not live in the sea, but they come out of peoples. The leopard with the 4 wings represents Greece. Now that could be pictured as the hunting leopard, the cheetah, and it doesn't touch the ground, and that's how Alexander the Great's army conquered. They conquered with great speed. So here we find Greece, and then we find a terrible beast representing pagan Rome. Great iron teeth, and it destroys, and it has 10 horns, and those 10 horns represent the kingdoms that came out of pagan Rome. But we find something interesting here. We find a little horn that comes up that has the face of a man and speaks blasphemy, and he roots up 3 other horns. And this could be none other than the Roman Catholic Church that came into being through the power, or from the power, of pagan Rome. So here we find a history of the nations starting with Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, represented in the book of Daniel. Now in Revelation 13, we read about a beast that comes up out of the sea, and he's a leopard-like beast. He's a dragon beast, actually, in many ways. He has the mouth of a lion, the feet of a bear, the same characteristics that we find in Daniel 7, representing the kingdoms of the world. And in Revelation 13, we find one of these heads receives a deadly wound, and the deadly wound is healed, and all the world wonders after the beast. Now that head represents the Pope of Rome. The papacy received a deadly wound in 1798 when Berthier, the French general under Napoleon, took the Pope captive, and there was no longer a king of the Vatican for a period of time. So here we find Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, and papal Rome. But another power came up after papal Rome, atheism. And as we study the 11th chapter of Revelation, we read about this power. Atheism took over Catholicism in 1798, and they worshiped the woman of reason, the goddess of reason. And they took the Bible and they tied them to the back end of donkeys, and they burned them, and they called Jesus the wretch, and they worshiped the goddess of reason. Atheism was another power that came in after the papal power. They were fed up with the persecutions of the Roman Church, but without God they went down horribly. In Revelation 13, we read about another beast that comes up out of the earth. He has lamb-like horns, religious freedom, gentleness, but he speaks as a dragon in the end. This can be none other than the United States, coming up out of the earth rather than the sea, a comparatively uninhabited land. As we think of the progression of the power of the United States, it's only been a leading power for a little over 100 years. Man crossed the plains in covered wagons, and the Industrial Revolution came into being. And then we find the United States standing for religious liberty, freedom.
It's my country, land of my birth. This is my country, grandest on earth. I pledge thee my allegiance, America the whole. This is my country, to have and to hold.
The books of Daniel and Revelation tell us of the rise and fall of the nations of this world. And the heads and the horns, the beast, the woman, all symbols of powers against the true God of heaven. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Now we have a movement in Europe for the nations of Europe to come together. Notice this symbol here representing the European community. 11 stars, not 12, and 5 on each side, and 1 larger star in the center. Could that tie in with the 10 kings and the 1 large star representing the devil? They use Peter Bruegel's painting of the Tower of Babel that he took from the Colosseum in Rome. And it says, Europe, many tongues. There is a coming together today of the nations of Europe. A new Europe on the horizon. These 10 kings that have received no power as kings as yet could very well tie in with the European community. But not only the European community that's being made up, but the United Nations. All these European countries belong to the United Nations. And the United Nations is gaining power today. Listen to the news and you will see that the United Nations will hold a big part in the end movements of this world. We find the Middle East has triggered a coming together of many of the nations of the world. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest, that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. In the end, these secular powers will turn on the religious powers, Babylon, and they will make her naked and desolate, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. In the end, these great movements of the world will end in destruction.
The number of nuclear warheads in the arsenals of the United States and the Soviet Union today is approximately 50,000. If just 10,000 of these, equal to 300,000 times the power of the bomb that fell on Hiroshima, were to be used now in a total nuclear war, all life on Earth will be faced with extinction.
Can it be, when it says they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire, that this will be nuclear war? The world is heading for the great tribulation. The Bible tells us the 10 kings have one mind, and they shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These are all the corrupt powers that have apostatized from allegiance to the law of Jehovah. They make war with the Lamb. Jesus is symbolized by that Lamb, and his people are represented by the Lamb of God. They make war against God's people, trying to destroy them in the end, the 144,000 during the plagues. But the weapons that they use to destroy God's people are turned on each other, and there is mass destruction. These have one mind. There will be a universal bond of union, one great harmony, a confederacy of Satan's forces, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Thus is manifested the same arbitrary oppressive power against religious liberty, freedom to worship God according to the dictates of conscience, as was manifested by the papacy when in the past it persecuted those who dared to refuse to conform with the religious rites and ceremonies of Romanism. In the warfare to be waged in the last days, there will be united in opposition to God's people all the corrupt powers that have apostatized from allegiance to the law of Jehovah. In this warfare, the Sabbath of the fourth commandment will be the great point at issue, for in the Sabbath commandment the great lawgiver identifies himself as the creator of the heavens and the earth. Now listen carefully to the words of the
President Bush had even more in mind
States.
when he asked for and got an invitation to use the House floor as a platform. He intends to explain what he first described going into last weekend's summit with Mikhail Gorbachev, a new world order being created by the superpowers, united on the side of peace against such renegades as Saddam Hussein.
If the nations of the world acting together continue, as they have been, to isolate Iraq and deny Saddam the fruits of aggression, we will set in place the cornerstone of an international order more peaceful, stable, and secure than any that we have known. To move toward an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace.
Familiar theme, calling for a new era of cooperation.
Your generation will not only be creating a new world, but will also live in it. Much of it will certainly be different from whatever we can imagine now.
In his comments here, Gorbachev again proclaimed an end to the Cold War, saying we should not dwell on who won. Instead, Gorbachev seeks to dwell on a new world order and a newly reformed Soviet Union.
The unrolled scroll on the dollar bill, Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order. Be aware of these words. You'll hear them more and more in these end times. Be aware of these words as you look through periodicals and magazines. New World Order. We will read and hear about this New World Order, and we can think of Revelation 17 as prophecy being fulfilled. A New World, September 17 in Time Magazine, 1990. In this article it said Bush and his aides talked about the showdown leading to a new world order. If the nations of the world acting together continue as they have been, we will put in place the cornerstone of an international order more peaceful than any that we have known. The nations of the world, the United Nations, are seeking a new world order. Who will be its leader in the end? The all-seeing eye, the capstone of that pyramid, represents the leader of this system. It can be none other than the devil himself, represented by the beast in Revelation 17, that takes the woman for a ride to destruction. In our next study, we will go over the end times as it deals with Satan personating Christ and how finally he is destroyed. God bless us all as we study his precious word.